The forest at the edge of the Thornwood territory had a reputation that kept most wolves away. Stories circulated through the packs about strange disappearances, about shadows that moved with unnatural purpose, about the anger of a king who trusted no one and showed mercy even less frequently. Alara had heard all these stories, had felt the weight of them settle into her bones during the 3 months she had been living alone in these woods, and still she stayed, not because she was brave, though survival had taught her a kind of courage she had never possessed in her old pack, but because she had nowhere else to go. The Silver Creek pack had made that abundantly clear when they cast her out, their alpha's words still echoing in her memory like a curse she could not shake. "You are too weak to be one of us. Your healing gifts are wasted on an Omega who cannot even shift properly. Leave before your weakness infects the rest of the pack." So she had left, taking only what she could carry, and had found this place where the territories blurred, and no pack claimed absolute dominion. Here, in the spaces between, she had learned to be invisible. The morning started like any other, with Alara checking her snares for rabbits and gathering the medicinal herbs that grew in the shaded groves where sunlight filtered through ancient oak trees. Her small shelter, barely more than a cave reinforced, with branches and moss, stayed hidden behind a waterfall that muffled sound and concealed her scent. She had learned these tricks from her mother, one of the few memories she cherished from a childhood that felt like it belonged to someone else entirely. Her mother had been a healer too, respected despite her Omega status, until the illness took her when Alara was barely 15. After that, everything had changed. Her father, a beta with ambitions of rising higher, had remarried quickly, and Alara became an inconvenience, a reminder of a love that no longer served his purposes. When her wolf emerged weak and small, unable to sustain a full shift for more than minutes at a time, his disappointment had been palpable. The pack had simply followed his lead, and rejection had become her constant companion long before the official casting out. She was humming softly to herself, a melody her mother used to sing while grinding herbs, when she heard it. The sound was so faint she almost missed it beneath the rushing water and bird calls, a whimper that spoke of pain and desperation. Alara froze, her basket of feverfew and yarrow clutched against her chest, every instinct screaming at her to run. Unknown wolves meant danger, especially here where pack law grew murky and territorial disputes could turn bloody without warning. But the sound came again, weaker this time, and something in her chest pulled tight with recognition. She knew suffering when she heard it. Taking a breath that did nothing to calm her racing heart, Alara moved toward the sound, her steps careful and quiet on the forest floor. What she found made her gasp aloud, horror and compassion warring in her expression as she took in the scene before her. The wolf caught in the hunter's trap was massive even in his injured state, his silver coat matted with blood and dirt, his golden eyes glazed with pain and fever. The steel jaws had closed around his hind leg with brutal efficiency, the kind of trap that was illegal in pack territories, but still used by human hunters who ventured too far into the wild places. The wolf had clearly been struggling for some time, the ground around the trap torn up from his attempts to free himself. But now he lay still, his breathing shallow and labored. When Alara approached, those golden eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her stumble, intelligence and pleading mixing in a gaze that was far too aware for a simple animal. This was no ordinary wolf. She realized with a jolt of understanding. This was a shifter, someone's son or brother or father, trapped and dying alone in the woods while his pack probably searched frantically for any sign of him. "Oh, you poor thing," Alara whispered, setting down her basket and approaching slowly with her hands visible and her posture non-threatening. The wolf's ears flicked toward her voice, but he did not growl or snap, which she took as permission to come closer. "I am going to help you, but you need to stay calm. This is going to hurt." She had no tools meant for this kind of work, nothing but her small knife and her knowledge of pressure points and healing. But she had to try. Leaving him here meant certain death, either from blood loss or from whatever predators would smell the blood and come investigating. Alara knelt beside the trap, examining the mechanism with hands that trembled despite her efforts to steady them. The design was cruel but simple. A spring-loaded jaw that required significant force to pry open. She would need leverage and timing, and the wolf would need to pull his leg free the moment she created an opening. "Listen to me," she said firmly, looking directly into those golden eyes that seemed to understand far more than they should. "When I open this, you pull back hard and fast. Do not hesitate. Do you understand?" The wolf blinked once, slowly, and Alara chose to interpret that as agreement. She positioned herself, bracing her feet against the base of the trap and gripping the jaws with both hands wrapped in thick leather from her belt to protect her palms. On 3. 1, 2, 3. She pulled with all her strength, her muscles screaming in protest, and for a terrifying moment, nothing happened. Then the mechanism gave way with a metallic groan, the jaws spreading just enough, and the wolf yanked his leg free with a yelp of pain that made Alara's heart clench. She released the trap immediately, scrambling backward as it snapped shut again, with a sound like thunder, and turned her attention to the injured shifter who had collapsed onto his side, panting heavily. The wound was bad, deep punctures that bled freely, but Alara had seen worse during her time helping her mother in the pack infirmary. She pulled yarrow and comfrey from her basket, working quickly to create a poultice that would stop the bleeding and prevent infection. The wolf watched her with those unsettling, intelligent eyes as she worked, never once trying to bite or pull away, even when her ministrations must have caused significant pain. "You are very brave," she told him softly, packing the herbs into the wounds and binding them with strips torn from her spare shirt. "But you are also very foolish to be out here alone. Where is your pack? Why are they not searching for you?" The wolf made a sound low in his chest, something between a whine and a growl that spoke of frustration and helplessness. Alara frowned, studying him more closely now that the immediate crisis had passed, and noticed details she had missed in her initial panic. The silver of his coat was too pure, too luminous to be common. His size suggested alpha blood, and the golden eyes marked him as someone of significance. "You cannot shift back, can you?" she asked quietly, understanding dawning with cold clarity. "Something is stopping you." The wolf's ears went back against his skull, confirmation enough. Alara's mind raced through possibilities, landing on the most likely explanation with a chill that had nothing to do with the forest air. Aconite. Someone poisoned you with wolfsbane. It made horrible sense. The plant was rare and dangerous, used only by those who knew exactly what they were doing, and had reasons to want a shifter incapacitated without killing them outright. In small doses, aconite could block the shift, sever the connection to pack bonds, and leave a werewolf trapped in their animal form until the poison worked its way out of their system or they died trying to fight it. The trap had likely been set by whoever had poisoned him, insurance to make sure he could not escape even in wolf form. Alara sat back on her heels, looking at this massive silver wolf who had somehow ended up in her path and made a decision that would change everything. "You are coming with me," she announced, her tone brooking no argument. "I have a shelter where you can recover properly, and I have herbs that will help flush the poison from your system. It will not be comfortable and it will not be quick, but you will survive." She stood, gathering her basket and slinging it over her shoulder, then looked down at the wolf expectantly. "Can you walk? Or do I need to figure out how to carry someone 3 times my size?" The wolf struggled to his feet, favoring his injured leg, but managing to stand, and Alara nodded in approval. "Good. Follow me and try not to bleed too obviously. We do not need to attract attention from anything else that might be hunting in these woods." The journey back to her shelter took longer than usual with the injured wolf limping beside her, but they made it without incident. Alara led him behind the waterfall into the small cave she had claimed as home, gesturing to the pile of furs and blankets that served as her bed. "Rest there. I need to prepare the treatment and it will take some time." The wolf collapsed onto the furs with obvious relief, his breathing still labored but more even than before. Alara built up her small fire, set water to boil, and began the careful work of preparing the antidote to aconite poisoning. It required milk thistle to protect the liver, activated charcoal to bind the toxins, and a careful blend of other herbs to support the body's natural healing processes. She worked in silence, her movements practiced and sure, while the wolf watched her with those penetrating golden eyes that made her feel seen, in a way she had not experienced since her mother's death. "I am Alara," she said eventually, needing to fill the silence with something other than the crackle of flames and her own racing thoughts. "I used to be of the Silver Creek pack, but I am alone now. They decided I was not worth keeping." She laughed, the sound bitter even to her own ears. "Too weak," they said. "My wolf is small and my shifts do not last. Never mind that I can heal injuries that would kill others, or that my mother was the best healer the pack had ever seen. All that mattered was that I could not fight, could not hunt like the others, could not be what they wanted me to be." She poured the prepared mixture into a wooden bowl, letting it cool to a temperature that would not burn, then brought it to the wolf. "You need to drink this. I know it tastes terrible, every healing draft does, but it will help. Trust me." The wolf sniffed the bowl suspiciously, then began to lap at the liquid with obvious distaste, his muzzle wrinkling but his determination clear. Alara smiled, despite everything, reaching out to stroke the soft fur between his ears without thinking. "Good. You are stronger than you look right now. I can tell." She returned to her fire, pulling out the dried meat and foraged vegetables that would make up their dinner, and began to prepare a meal large enough for two. The wolf had finished the medicine and was watching her again, his head resting on his paws, but his attention never wavering. "You must be hungry," Alara continued, falling into the habit of talking to fill the loneliness that had become her constant companion. "I do not have much, but I am willing to share. It seems only fair since you are injured and cannot hunt for yourself." She cooked the simple stew in her battered pot, adding herbs for flavor and nutrition, and when it was ready, she divided it between two bowls. One she kept for herself, settling cross-legged by the fire, and the other she placed in front of the wolf. "Eat," she instructed gently. "You need to keep your strength up if you are going to heal properly." The wolf looked at the bowl, then at her, something shifting in his expression that looked almost like gratitude or perhaps wonder. He ate slowly, carefully, and Alara found herself smiling as she watched him. "You have very good manners for a wolf," she teased lightly. "Your mother raised you well, whoever she was." They ate together in comfortable silence, the warmth of the fire pushing back the chill of the evening, and for the first time in months Alara did not feel quite so alone. What Alara could not know, what she had no way of understanding as she shared her meager meal with the injured wolf and told him stories about her mother's healing techniques, was that this moment was being watched. Miles away, in the stone fortress that served as the seat of Thornwood power, Alpha King Cale Thornwood stood in his war room surrounded by maps and reports, his expression carved from granite as he listened to his tracker's latest update. "The scent trail goes cold at the eastern border, my king," the tracker reported, his voice carefully neutral in the way of those who knew their leader's temper. "Whatever happened to Prince Darien? It happened in the disputed territories where our patrols rarely venture." Cale's hands clenched into fists on the table, the wood groaning under the pressure of barely controlled rage and fear. His brother had been missing for 4 days, vanished without a trace after what should have been a routine inspection of the border outposts, and every hour that passed made it less likely they would find him alive. "Expand the search," Cale commanded, his voice like gravel and ice. "I want every wolf we have combing those woods. Darien is out there somewhere, and I will not rest until he is found." The assembled wolves bowed and dispersed to carry out his orders, leaving Cale alone with his thoughts and the gnawing fear he refused to show to his pack. Darien was more than his brother, more than his heir and second in command. He was the only person Cale truly trusted in a world that had taught him. Trust was a luxury he could not afford. Their father had been betrayed by his closest advisor, murdered in what was made to look like a hunting accident. And Cale had spent the 12 years since then building walls around his heart, and ruling with an iron fist that allowed no weakness. He had lovers but no mate, allies but no friends, and the throne that should have felt like power often felt like a cage he could not escape. But Darian had always been different, always been the light to Cale's darkness, the hope to his cynicism. Where Cale ruled through fear and strength, Darian led through charisma and genuine care for the pack members. People loved Darian in a way they would never love Cale, and Cale had made peace with that because he knew his brother's goodness was real, not a manipulation or a play for power. If Darian was truly gone, if someone had taken him from this world, Cale would burn down everything and everyone until he found the ones responsible. The rage in his chest was a living thing, demanding blood and vengeance. But beneath it lurked something worse: grief. The terrible, suffocating grief of losing the only person who had ever truly known him and loved him anyway. Cale moved to the window, looking out over his territory as the sun set in shades of crimson and gold, painting the world in colors that reminded him of blood and fire. Somewhere out there, his brother was either fighting for his life or already lost, and Cale was no closer to finding him than he had been 4 days ago. The feeling of helplessness was foreign and hateful. Everything he had worked to never experience again since the night he found his father's body, and realized that even kings could be made vulnerable. He would not be vulnerable again. He would not lose anyone else he cared about. And if that meant tearing apart the entire forest until every secret was revealed and every shadow dispelled, then that was exactly what he would do. 3 days passed in Alara's small shelter behind the waterfall. 3 days during which the silver wolf slowly began to recover his strength. Alara maintained a careful routine of medicine, food, and gentle conversation, treating her patient with a care that came from genuine compassion rather than obligation. She changed his bandages twice daily, noting with satisfaction that the wounds were healing cleanly with no signs of infection. The aconite was working its way out of his system gradually, but it was a slow process that required patience and consistent treatment. The wolf, for his part, proved to be an ideal patient, accepting her ministrations without complaint, and seeming to actually enjoy her rambling stories about herbs and healing techniques and the childhood memories she rarely allowed herself to revisit. "You are a very good listener," Alara told him on the 3rd evening as they shared another simple meal. "Better than most people I have met, actually. You do not judge or interrupt or tell me my ideas are worthless because I am just an omega." She stroked his head absently, having grown comfortable with the physical contact over the past few days. "I think we are becoming friends, you and I. Is that strange? To be friends with a wolf I found in a trap?" The wolf made a sound that might have been agreement or amusement, pressing his muzzle into her hand in a gesture that felt almost affectionate. Alara smiled, warmth blooming in her chest at this small connection, this proof that she was not as alone as she had believed herself to be. That night, Alara woke to the sound of movement in the cave, her healer's instincts pulling her from sleep with immediate alertness. The fire had burned down to embers, casting barely enough light to see by, but she could make out the shape of the wolf standing near the entrance to the shelter. He was trembling, his whole body shaking with what looked like effort or pain, and Alara scrambled to her feet in concern. "What is wrong? Are you in pain? Do you need more medicine?" She approached carefully, reaching out to touch him, and froze when she felt the heat radiating from his body like a furnace. This was not fever. This was something else entirely. The wolf turned to look at her, his golden eyes blazing with an inner light, and Alara understood with a rush of excitement and relief. "You are trying to shift. The poison is weak. Enough now. You can feel your human form again." She stepped back to give him space, watching in fascination as the wolf's body began to shimmer and change, the process clearly agonizing after days trapped in one form. Bones cracked and reformed, fur receded into skin, and within moments where a wolf had stood there, was instead a man. He collapsed immediately, catching himself on his hands and knees, his breathing ragged, and his body covered in sweat despite the cool air. Alara grabbed a blanket and draped it over his shoulders without looking too closely, giving him privacy and warmth as he struggled to recover from the shift. "Easy," she murmured, the same soothing tone she had used when he was still a wolf. "You are safe. Just breathe. Water," the man rasped, his voice rough from disuse. Ilara hurried to bring him a cup, supporting his back as he drank deeply. In the dim light, she could see he was younger than she had expected, perhaps only a few years older than her own 22. Years, with the kind of aristocratic features that spoke of good bloodlines and careful breeding. His silver hair fell to his shoulders in tangled waves, and when he finally looked up at her, those golden eyes held the same intelligence and warmth she had seen in the wolf. "Thank you," he said simply, the two words carrying a weight of meaning that made her throat tight. "You saved my life. You did not have to, did not know who or what I was, but you saved me anyway. I could not leave you to die in that trap," Ilara replied, settling beside him with the blanket pulled around them both for warmth. "What happened to you? Who did this?" The man was quiet for a long moment, his expression turning grim, as memory clearly played out behind his eyes. "Betrayal," he said finally. "I was inspecting the eastern border outposts when I was ambushed by wolves wearing no pack scent. They moved like trained fighters, knew exactly where to strike to incapacitate without killing. Someone gave me aconite in my water before the attack, timing it so I would be weak when they came. They left me trapped and injured, expecting nature to finish what they started." His hands clenched into fists, anger and pain mixing in his voice. "I need to get word to my brother. He will be searching for me, probably tearing apart the territory in the process. Kale does not handle uncertainty well." Ilara's breath caught in her throat as understanding crashed over her like a physical blow. "Kale, as in Alpha. King Kale Thornwood?" The man nodded, watching her reaction carefully. "I am Darian Thornwood, second prince of the Thornwood pack, and heir to the throne. And you, healer who shares her food with injured wolves and asks nothing in return. Who are you really?" Ilara felt the world tilt sideways, her mind struggling to process the magnitude of what she had done without realizing it. She had saved the brother of the most feared alpha in 5 territories, had been living in close quarters with royalty, while thinking he was just another lost shifter. "I am nobody," she whispered, the old pain of rejection rising up to choke her. "Just an Omega cast out from Silver Creek for being too weak to matter. I live here because I have nowhere else to go." Darian's expression shifted, something fierce and protective flashing across his features. "You are not nobody. You are the person who saved my life when you could have walked away, who has been treating my wounds and feeding me and talking to me like I matter for 3 days straight. That makes you far from nobody in my eyes." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand in his. "What is your name, healer?" His touch was warm and gentle, completely different from the harsh grabs and dismissive gestures she had grown accustomed to from her old pack. "Ilara," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "My name is Ilara." Before Darian could respond, before the moment could stretch into something more, a sound from outside the cave made them both freeze. Footsteps, multiple sets, moving with the coordinated precision of trained warriors. Voices calling out in patterns that suggested a search grid being systematically covered. And then, cutting through everything else, a command spoken in a voice that radiated absolute authority and barely controlled fury. "Search every cave, every hollow, every place that could provide shelter. My brother is out here somewhere, and we will find him tonight." Darian's eyes went wide with recognition, and something that might have been worry. "That is Kale," he said quietly, "and he sounds ready to murder everyone he meets until he gets answers." Ilara felt panic rise in her chest. All the stories about the brutal Alpha King flooding back with crystal clarity. He would find them here, would see her with his brother, and in his current state of mind, he would likely assume the worst. An Omega alone with an injured prince, in hiding, while the whole pack searched desperately. It looked bad. It looked like exactly the kind of conspiracy that would justify immediate execution. "You need to call out to him," Ilara said urgently, trying to pull her hand free from Darian's grip. "Let him know you are safe before he does something we will all regret." But Darian held on, his expression turning thoughtful in a way that made Ilara deeply nervous. "Wait. I want to see how he reacts to you first. Call it a test of his character." Before Ilara could protest this terrible idea. Before she could point out that testing an enraged Alpha King was possibly the stupidest thing anyone could do, the footsteps reached the waterfall and then moved through it. Alpha King Cale Thornwood stepped into the cave like a storm-given form, his presence filling the small space with an intensity that stole the air from Alara's lungs. He was massive, taller even than his brother, and built like a warrior who had spent his life in battle. His dark hair was pulled back from a face that was all sharp angles and harsh beauty, and his eyes were the silver of moonlight on snow, cold and piercing as they swept the cave, taking in every detail. Those eyes found Alara first, kneeling by the fire with a blanket around her shoulders, and his brother's hand still clasped in hers, and Alara watched as something incredible happened. The Alpha King's expression shifted through a dozen emotions in the span of a heartbeat. Rage, confusion, recognition, and then something that looked almost like pain. His body went rigid, every muscle locking into place, and the scent that rolled off him was pure, shocked arousal, mixed with territorial fury. Mate, something whispered in the back of Alara's mind, her weak wolf finally stirring after months of dormancy. The Alpha King is our mate. The bond snapped into place like a physical thing, a golden thread connecting her chest to his, and Alara gasped at the intensity of it. She had heard about mate bonds her whole life, knew they were supposed to be rare and precious and unbreakable, but nothing had prepared her for the reality. Every cell in her body suddenly knew this man, recognized him as the other half of her soul, and wanted nothing more than to close the distance between them. But the look on Cale's face was not joy or relief, or even acceptance. It was rejection and suspicion and rage. And when he finally spoke, his voice was like ice scraping over stone. "Get your hands off my brother," Cale commanded. Alpha command in his voice, hitting Alara like a physical blow that made her wolf whimper and cower. Now. Alara released Darian's hand immediately, scrambling backward until her back hit the cave wall, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. Darian stood slowly, the blanket falling away to reveal he wore only the remains of his shredded clothes, and positioned himself between Alara and his brother in a gesture of clear protection. "Stand down, Cale," Darian said, firmly, his own alpha authority rising to meet his brother's. "This woman saved my life. She found me trapped and poisoned, has been healing me for 3 days, and did not even know who I was until 5 minutes ago. You will not threaten her." Kyle's eyes flickered between his brother and Alara, calculation and emotion warring in his expression. She could be part of the conspiracy, positioned here specifically to find you, to keep you hidden while our enemies consolidated power. The words were rational, the suspicion understandable given what Darian had revealed about his ambush. But they still cut Alara to the bone. "I live here," she said quietly, forcing herself to meet those cold silver eyes, even though everything in her wanted to submit and flee. "I have been here for 3 months, alone, surviving on what I can forage and trap. I found your brother by accident and I helped him, because leaving someone to die in agony is not something I am capable of doing. If that makes me guilty of conspiracy, then I suppose you should execute me now and spare us both the extended version of this conversation." The silence that followed her words was deafening, broken only by the crackle of the dying fire and the sound of wolves moving around outside the cave, clearly waiting for their king's orders. Kyle stared at her with an intensity that felt like being flayed alive, every secret and fear laid bare under that merciless gaze, and Alara refused to look away. She had survived being cast out, had learned to live alone in hostile territory, had saved a prince without even knowing it. She would not cower before this man, mate bond or not, simply because he had decided she was guilty until proven innocent. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only seconds, Cale spoke again. "Marcus," he called, and one of the wolves outside entered the cave immediately, a beta with graying fur and shrewd eyes. "Take my brother back to the fortress. Have the healers examine him and..." Post guards on his room until we determine who was behind the attack." "What about her?" Marcus asked, his gaze flicking to Alara with undisguised curiosity. Kale's expression hardened into something that might have been carved from stone. "She comes with us. I will question her personally." Darian moved as if to protest, but Kale cut him off with a look that brooked no argument. "This is not a request, brother. You will return home where you are safe, and I will handle the situation." The Alpha. Command in his voice left no room for defiance, and Darian's shoulders slumped in reluctant submission. He turned to Alara, his golden eyes apologetic and concerned. "I am sorry. My brother is not usually this unreasonable. The fear of losing me has made him paranoid." He reached out and squeezed her shoulder gently. "Thank you again, Alara, for everything. I will not forget what you have done." Then he was being led away by Marcus and several other wolves, leaving Alara alone with the Alpha. King, who was looking at her like she was a puzzle he could not solve, and a threat he needed to eliminate. The mate bond hummed between them, growing stronger now that they were alone, and Alara could see the moment Kale felt it too. His expression shifted, shock and denial warring with something that might have been longing before his walls slammed back into place. "You feel it," he said. Not a question, but an accusation. "The bond." Alara nodded, seeing no point in lying when the truth was written all over both of them in scent and body language. "I feel it. You are my mate, whether either of us wants it or not." Kyle's laugh was bitter and completely devoid of humor. "Of course you are, because the universe has such a wonderful sense of irony." He moved closer, invading her space in a clear display of dominance, and Alara forced herself to stand her ground. "I do not trust you. I do not know if you are innocent or guilty, if you helped my brother or if you are part of whatever conspiracy almost killed him, but you are my mate, which means I cannot simply execute you without destroying myself in the process." His hand came up to grip her chin, tilting her face toward the light so he could study her features. "So here is what is going to happen. You will come to the fortress as my guest, not my prisoner, and you will stay there while I investigate your story. If you are telling the truth, if you truly did save Darian out of simple compassion, then we will discuss what to do about this bond. If you are lying, if I find any evidence that you were involved in the attack on my brother, then mate or not, I will make you wish you had never been born." The threat should have terrified her. Probably would have terrified any sensible person, but Alara felt anger rise up to meet it, hot and defiant. "Do what you need to do, Alpha King. Investigate all you want. You will find nothing, because there is nothing to find except a rejected Omega trying to survive in a world that decided she had no value." She pulled her chin free from his grip, stepping back to put distance between them. "And for the record, I did not ask for this bond any more than you did. I was perfectly content living alone where no one could hurt me anymore. So forgive me if I do not fall at your feet in gratitude for the privilege of being suspected and threatened by my so-called fated mate." Something flickered in Kale's eyes, there and gone too quickly to identify. And when he spoke again, his voice had lost some of its harsh edge. "You have fire. I will give you that." He turned toward the cave entrance, clearly expecting her to follow. "Gather whatever belongings you want to bring. We leave immediately." Alara looked around at her small shelter, at the life she had built from nothing, and felt grief mix with resignation. This place had been a refuge, a home when she had none, but she had always known it was temporary. Nothing good ever lasted for people like her. She gathered her few possessions, her mother's healing journal, and her precious herbs, the blankets, and the small knife that had been her constant companion. When she turned back to the cave entrance, Kale was watching her with an expression she could not read. "I am ready," she said simply, and followed the Alpha King out into the night, leaving behind the waterfall and the peace she had found there, walking toward a future that terrified her more than any forest ever could, the journey to the Thornwood. Fortress took most of the night, with Alara riding on a horse provided by one of Kyle's warriors, since her weak wolf could not sustain a run of that distance. Kyle himself ran ahead in wolf form, a massive black beast that radiated power and barely restrained violence, and Alara tried not to think about how her life had changed so dramatically in the space of a few hours. From solitary healer to potential conspirator to fated mate of the most dangerous alpha in the territories. If this was the universe's idea of a joke, she failed to see the humor in it. The fortress appeared as dawn broke over the mountains, a massive structure of stone and timber that spoke of centuries of occupation and defensive preparation. Alara had never seen anything like it, had lived her whole life in the relatively modest packhouses of Silver Creek, and the sheer scale of it made her feel small and insignificant. Wolves moved through the courtyards and halls with military precision, everyone having a purpose and a place. And Alara realized with uncomfortable clarity that she had no idea where she fit in this world. Kale shifted back to human form as they approached the main gates, accepting clothes from an attending servant without modesty, and gestured for Alara to follow him. "Your rooms are in the guest wing," he informed her, his tone formal and distant. "You will have everything you need, but you are not to leave the wing without an escort. Consider it protective custody until I determine your level of involvement in recent events." Alara bit back the angry response that wanted to escape and simply nodded, following him through corridors that seemed to stretch forever until they reached a suite of rooms that was larger than her entire shelter had been. The furnishings were simple but well made, the bed covered in soft furs, and there was even a separate bathing room with a large copper tub. "Someone will bring you clothes and food," Kale continued, still not looking, directly at her. "Rest. We will speak again once I have had time to interview my brother and review the evidence we have gathered about the attack." He turned to leave, then paused in the doorway, his back still to her. "For what it is worth, I hope you are telling the truth. I would prefer not to have to reject my fated mate because she conspired to murder my brother. For what it is worth," Alara echoed, exhaustion and anger making her reckless. "I hope you find whatever evidence you need to. Trust me. Because I have no interest in being bonded to someone who looks at me like I am something he found stuck to the bottom of his shoe." Kale's shoulders tensed at her words, but he did not respond, simply walked away and closed the door behind him with controlled precision. Alara stood alone in the middle of the beautiful room, surrounded by luxury she had never experienced, and let herself cry for the first time since being cast out of her pack. She cried for her lost shelter, for the fragile peace she had built, for the mate bond that should have been a blessing but felt like another burden. And when the tears finally stopped, she washed her face, straightened her spine, and decided that whatever came next, she would face it with the same strength that had kept her alive these past 3 months. If you enjoyed this dramatic beginning, please hit that like button and let me know in the comments what you think will happen next. Will Kale find proof of Alara's innocence? Or will his paranoia destroy their mate bond before it even has a chance to form? And what about the real conspirators who tried to kill Darian? Subscribe to see how this supernatural romance unfolds, because trust me, we are just getting started. The next few days passed in a strange limbo, where Alara existed in comfort while feeling like a prisoner. True to Kale's word, she had everything she could need in terms of food, clothing, and basic amenities, but she was not permitted to leave the guest wing without an armed escort, and those escorts made it very clear they were guards rather than companions. She spent her time reading from the extensive library that had been made available to her, practicing her healing techniques on the plants that grew in window boxes, and trying very hard not to think about the mate bond that seemed to grow stronger every day, despite her best efforts to ignore it. She could feel Kale even when he was not near, could sense his moods shifting like storms on the horizon, and it was driving her slowly mad. On the 4th day, Darian came to visit her, limping slightly but looking infinitely better than he had in the cave. He was dressed in fine clothes that emphasized his royal status, his silver hair clean and styled, and when he smiled at her, it was with genuine warmth. "Alara, I am so glad to see you. I have been trying to get Kyle to let me visit since we arrived, but he has been, well, difficult." He settled into the chair across from her, his expression turning serious. "I have told him everything I remember about the attack, about how you found me and helped me without asking for anything in return. I have vouched for your character in the strongest possible terms. But my brother is, as you have probably noticed, not inclined to trust easily. That is an understatement, Alara replied dryly, pouring tea for both of them from the service that had been delivered earlier. He looks at me like I might sprout fangs and attack him at any moment. Darian accepted the tea with a nod of thanks, his golden eyes sympathetic. Cale has his reasons, though they do not excuse his behavior toward you. Our father was killed by his most trusted advisor 12 years ago, murdered over a political dispute that could have been resolved without bloodshed. Cale found the body, saw the betrayal firsthand, and it changed him. He built walls around himself and decided that trusting anyone was a weakness he could not afford. I am the only person he allows close, and even then he keeps parts of himself hidden. Alara absorbed this information, feeling some of her anger toward the Alpha King soften into reluctant understanding. That is tragic, and I am sorry he experienced such pain, but it does not give him the right to treat everyone as potential enemies, especially not his fated mate. Darian's expression brightened with interest. So you have accepted the bond? You want to be with him? The question made Alara pause, forcing her to examine feelings she had been trying to ignore. I do not know what I want, she admitted slowly. The bond is there, undeniable, and growing stronger every day. My wolf recognizes him as ours, yearns for him in a way that is almost painful. But the man himself, he terrifies me. Not because I think he would physically hurt me, but because I have already been rejected by one pack, already been told I am not good enough. I cannot go through that again, especially not with someone the universe says is supposed to be my perfect match. Cale is afraid, Darian said gently. He feels the bond too. I can see it in the way he paces like a caged animal, in how he avoids being alone with you. He wants to reject it because accepting it means being vulnerable, means trusting you not to use the bond against him. But I think deep down, he also wants exactly what you do. Someone who sees him, truly sees him, and chooses him anyway. He leaned forward, his expression earnest. Give him time, Alara. Let him work through his fears at his own pace. I truly believe that once he accepts you are not a threat, once he allows himself to feel what is between you, he will be the mate you deserve. Alara wanted to believe him, wanted to have faith that the cold, suspicious Alpha King could become someone capable of love and trust. But faith had never been her strong suit, beaten out of her by years of disappointment and rejection. I will stay because I have nowhere else to go, and because running would only confirm his suspicions, she said finally. But I will not beg for his acceptance, will not diminish myself trying to prove I am worthy of the bond. If Cale wants me, truly wants me, he will have to choose it himself, and he will have to treat me with the respect every person deserves, mate bond or not. Their conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door, and one of Alara's guards entered with a formal bow. Lady Alara, the Alpha King requests your presence in his study. Immediately. Alara exchanged a look with Darian, her heart suddenly racing with apprehension. This was it, she realized. Whatever investigation Cale had been conducting, it was apparently complete, and now she would learn whether he believed in her innocence or had decided she was guilty. I will come with you, Darian offered, standing. But the guard shook his head. The Alpha King was very specific. Lady Alara is to come alone. Alara stood, smoothing down the borrowed dress she wore, and tried to project a confidence she did not feel. It is all right, Darian. I can face him. She followed the guard through the fortress, noting how wolves stopped to stare as she passed, their expressions ranging from curious to hostile. News of the Alpha King's fated mate had apparently spread through the pack, and not everyone was pleased about an unknown Omega being bonded to their leader. The guard led her to a heavy wooden door, knocked twice, then opened it to reveal a large study lined with books and maps. Kyle stood by the window, his back to the door, and did not turn when she entered. Leave us, he commanded, and the guard bowed and departed, closing the door with a soft click that sounded unnaturally loud in the silence. For a long moment neither of them spoke. the mate bond humming between them like a living thing, demanding acknowledgement. Finally, Cale turned to face her, and Alara was struck by how exhausted he looked. Dark circles shadowed his silver eyes, and his usual, rigid posture had softened slightly, as if he had been carrying a weight too heavy to bear, and was finally setting it down. "I have completed my investigation," he said without preamble. "I interviewed everyone who might have information about the attack on Darien, reviewed patrol reports from the eastern border, and sent scouts to your shelter to verify your story." He moved to his desk, picking up a folder of documents. "Everything you told me was true. You have been living alone in that cave for 3 months, surviving on foraged food and occasional successful hunts. The tracks around your shelter show no evidence of visitors or co-conspirators. The local prey populations show the kind of careful management that suggests someone living sustainably rather than just passing through." Ilara felt relief wash over her so intensely it was almost painful, her knees going weak with the realization that she had been vindicated. "So you believe me now? You accept that I had nothing to do with the attack on your brother?" Kyle set down the folder and looked at her directly, for the first time since she had entered the room. "I believe you saved Darien's life. I believe you acted with compassion and courage, asking nothing in return. And I believe I owe you an apology for my treatment of you these past few days." The words sounded like they cost him something to say, like admitting fault went against every instinct he possessed. "I allowed my fear and my past experiences to color my judgment of you, and that was unfair. You deserved better, especially as my fated mate." "Yes, I did," Alara agreed, refusing to make this easy for him. "I deserved to be trusted until given reason not to be. I deserved basic courtesy and the benefit of the doubt. Instead, you treated me like a criminal and made me feel like I was being punished for the crime of saving your brother's life." Cale flinched at her words but did not argue or make excuses. "You are right, and I am sorry. I do not have much practice at trusting people or at being wrong, but I am trying to learn." He took a step toward her, then stopped, clearly uncertain of his welcome. "I would like to start over, if you are willing. Not as captor and prisoner, but as what we actually are. Mates trying to figure out what that means." Alara studied him carefully, looking past the harsh exterior to the man beneath who was clearly struggling with vulnerabilities he rarely acknowledged. The mate bond pulled at her, urging acceptance and forgiveness. But she forced herself to think rather than simply feel. "I am willing to try," she said slowly, "but I need you to understand something. I have been rejected before, told I was not good enough, cast aside like I did not matter. I will not go through that again, not even for a mate bond. If we do this, if we explore what is between us, you need to commit to actually trying, to being honest with me even when it is difficult, to treating me as an equal partner rather than a problem to be solved." "I can do that," Cale replied, and something in his expression softened, making him look younger and more approachable. "Or at least I can try. I will not pretend to be good at this, at opening up and being vulnerable, but for you I am willing to learn." He held out his hand, palm up in an offering rather than a demand. "Let me show you something. Let me explain why I am the way I am, and maybe then you will understand why trust is so difficult for me." Ilara looked at his outstretched hand, at this first tentative gesture of connection, and made a decision. She closed the distance between them and placed her hand in his, feeling the spark of the mate bond intensify at the contact. "Show me," she said simply. Cale led her through the fortress to a section she had not yet seen, a wing that was clearly private and rarely accessed. He stopped in front of a door that looked older than the rest. The wood darkened with age and carved with symbols she did not recognize. "This was my father's study," he explained quietly. "I have kept it exactly as it was the night he died. A reminder of the cost of misplaced trust." He opened the door, revealing a room frozen in time. Books still open on the desk, maps spread across tables, everything preserved like a shrine or a crime scene. Cale moved to stand beside the desk, his hand resting on the back of a chair. He was working late, reviewing border agreements with a neighboring pack. His advisor, a man named Thomas, who had served our family for 20 years. Brought him poisoned wine. The pain in Cale's voice was raw and immediate, as fresh as if the betrayal had happened yesterday rather than 12 years ago. Thomas wanted to take the throne for himself, had been building support among certain factions who believed my father was too soft, too willing to negotiate rather than conquer. The poison was designed to mimic a heart attack, make it look like natural causes, but I found him before. It was completely finished. He lived long enough to tell me what happened, to warn me to trust no one. Cale's silver eyes met hers, filled with old grief and current fear. I was 16 years old, suddenly responsible for a pack and a territory, surrounded by wolves who might or might not have been part of the conspiracy. I built walls because walls were the only thing that kept me alive long enough to secure my throne and root out the traitors. Alara felt her heart break for the boy he had been thrust into impossible circumstances and forced to grow up far too quickly. I am sorry you went through that. No one should have to experience such betrayal, especially not so young. She squeezed his hand gently. But Cale, I am not Thomas. I am not going to poison you or betray you or use your trust against you. I am just an Omega who saved your brother, because it was the right thing to do, and who happens to be fated to bond with you through no choice of either of ours. I know. Cale admitted, his thumb stroking over her knuckles in a gesture that seemed unconscious. Logically, I know you are not a threat, but the fear lives deeper than logic, buried in the part of me that remembers finding my father dying and realizing the person who did it was someone we had trusted completely. He turned to face her fully, using his free hand to cup her cheek with surprising gentleness. I want to trust you, Alara. I want to believe in the mate bond and in the possibility of something good coming from all of this chaos. But I need you to be patient with me while I learn how. Can you do that? The question hung between them, heavy with significance, and Alara realized this was her choice to make. She could walk away now, reject the bond before it became any stronger, protect herself from the possibility of future pain, or she could take a chance on this damaged, complicated man who was offering her something he gave no one else. Vulnerability, trust, a future built on more than fear and survival. I can be patient, she said finally, as long as you promise to actually try, to not use your past as an excuse to keep me at arm's length forever. I need to see progress, Cale, even if it is slow. You will, he promised. And then he did something that shocked her. He leaned down and pressed his forehead to hers, a gesture of intimacy and trust among wolves, the kind of contact that was reserved for pack and family and mates. The bond sang between them at the contact, warmth and rightness flooding through Alara's system in a way that made her gasp. This was what it was supposed to feel like, she realized. This connection, this sense of completion, this feeling of finally finding the place where she belonged. Cale's scent surrounded her, pine and snow, and something uniquely him. And when he spoke again, his voice was rough with emotion. Thank you for saving my brother. Thank you for being patient with me. And thank you for not giving up on the possibility of us before we even had a chance to begin. They stood like that for a long moment, foreheads pressed together, hands clasped, the mate bond weaving around them like golden threads in the fading afternoon light. It was not a declaration of love or a promise of forever, but it was a beginning, a first step toward something that might eventually become everything either of them had ever wanted. When they finally pulled apart, Cale's expression had lost some of its hardness, replaced by something that looked almost like hope. Come, he said, keeping her hand in his. Let me introduce you properly to the pack, not as a suspect, but as my mate. It is time they knew the truth. The formal introduction took place that evening in the Great Hall, with what seemed like every member of the Thornwood pack in attendance. Alara stood beside Cale on the raised platform at the head of the room, trying not to be intimidated by the sea of faces staring up at her with varying degrees of curiosity, skepticism, and outright hostility. Cale had insisted she wear one of the formal gowns from the wardrobe that had been provided, a deep green that brought out the unusual gold flecks in her brown eyes, and she had to admit it made her feel more confident than her usual simple clothes ever had. Darian stood on Cale's other side, his presence a comforting reminder that she had at least one ally in this massive pack. "Members of Thornwood," Cale began, his voice carrying easily through the hall, without needing to shout. "I have gathered you here tonight to make an announcement. As you all know, my brother Darian was attacked and nearly killed 4 days ago by unknown assailants. During his recovery in the wild, he was found and saved by this woman, Ilara, who tended his wounds and protected him at great personal risk, without knowing his identity or expecting any reward." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, some approving and some skeptical, and Cale raised a hand for silence. "I have also discovered that Ilara is my fated mate, chosen by the moon herself to stand at my side. She will be recognized as the future Luna of this pack, and I expect her to be treated with the respect and honor that position deserves." The announcement caused an immediate uproar, voices rising in protest and question. "She is an Omega," someone shouted from the back. "How can an Omega be Luna? She has no strength, no warrior skills." Other voices joined in, the criticism building into a wave that made Ilara want to shrink back and hide. But she forced herself to stand tall, to meet the hostile gazes with calm determination, refusing to be cowed by their prejudice. Cale's expression darkened, his alpha authority rolling out in waves that made the entire room go silent. Ilara's designation as Omega is irrelevant to her worth or her capability. She saved my brother when anyone else would have left him to die. She survived 3 months alone in hostile territory, using nothing but her wits and her healing skills. She has shown more courage and compassion in the short time I have known her than most of you have demonstrated in your entire lives. His defense of her was fierce and unexpected, and Ilara felt warmth bloom in her chest at hearing him speak of her with such respect. "Furthermore," Cale continued, his voice dropping into a dangerous register, "anyone who disrespects my mate disrespects me, and I think we all know how I handle disrespect." The threat was clear and backed by 12 years of ruthless leadership, and the protests died immediately. An older woman near the front, her hair shot through with silver, and her eyes sharp with intelligence, stepped forward and bowed formally. "Alpha King, I am Marjorie, head of the healers. If your mate has the skills you describe, we would be honored to have her join our ranks. Healers are always valued in Thornwood, regardless of their designation." Cale looked to Ilara, giving her the choice rather than making it for her, and she appreciated the gesture more than he probably realized. "I would like that," Ilara said, her voice clear and steady. "Healing is what I know, what I love. If I can serve the pack in that capacity, I would be grateful for the opportunity." Marjorie smiled, the expression transforming her severe features into something warm and welcoming. "Then it is settled. You will start tomorrow, and I will teach you everything our healers need to know." Other pack members began to step forward then, offering their own welcomes and congratulations. And Ilara realized that while not everyone was pleased about her sudden elevation, many were willing to give her a chance to prove herself. It was more than she had received from Silver Creek, more than she had dared to hope for. The feast that followed the announcement was lavish. Tables loaded with roasted meats and fresh bread and vegetables prepared in a dozen different ways. Ilara found herself seated at the high table between Cale and Maul. Darian, watching the pack interact with each other in ways that spoke of genuine community and connection. This was what a healthy pack looked like, she realized. Not the rigid hierarchy and constant competition of Silver Creek, but a group of wolves who genuinely cared about each other's well-being. "You are staring," Cale murmured, leaning close enough that his breath stirred the hair at her temple. "What are you thinking about?" "I was thinking that your pack seems happy," Ilara replied. "Honestly, despite your reputation as a harsh leader, these wolves respect you and seem to feel safe here. That is not what I expected." Cale's expression turned thoughtful, his silver eyes scanning the room with the attention of a leader who knew every person in his care. "I am hard when I need to be, enforce discipline when rules are broken, but I also protect what is mine with everything I have. These wolves know that as long as they are loyal and contribute to the pack's welfare, they will be cared for. That creates a different kind of respect than ruling through fear alone." He picked up his glass, taking a slow drink before continuing. I want to be better than my father's killer, better than the wolves who think power should be taken rather than earned. Sometimes that means making difficult choices, but it also means building something worth protecting. Alara saw him differently then, not as the cold Alpha King, but as a leader trying to do right by his people while carrying the weight of past trauma. "You are a good king," she said softly, "even if you do not always believe it yourself." Kale turned to look at her fully, something vulnerable flickering in his expression before his walls came back up. "You barely know me. How can you possibly make that judgment?" Alara smiled, reaching out to cover his hand with hers on the table, a public claiming of the mate bond that made several nearby conversations pause. "I know you defended me to your entire pack, even though we have only just met. I know you apologized when you realized you were wrong, which takes more strength than most wolves possess. And I know that despite everything you have been through, you still want to believe in the possibility of trust and connection. That tells me everything I need to know about who you really are." The moment stretched between them, charged with meaning and possibility, and Alara thought Kale might actually smile until Darian cleared his throat pointedly. "As touching as this is, and it really is quite sweet, we have a conspiracy to unravel. The wolves who attacked me are still out there, and they will likely try again once they realize I survived." His expression turned grim, the easy humor fading into something harder. "We need to figure out who hired them and what they were hoping to accomplish by taking me out of succession." Kale's attention shifted immediately, the leader overriding the mate as he focused on the tactical problem. "I have scouts searching for the attackers, but so far they have found nothing. No scent trails, no witnesses, no evidence of who they were or where they came from. It is as if they appeared specifically to attack you, and then vanished like ghosts." He drummed his fingers on the table, a rare sign of frustration. "That level of coordination suggests significant resources and inside knowledge of your movements. We have a traitor in our ranks, possibly more than one. Then we flush them out," Darian suggested, his tactical mind clearly working through possibilities. "Make them think I am vulnerable, create an opportunity they cannot resist, and trap them when they make their move." It was a dangerous plan, using himself as bait, but Alara could see the logic in it. Whoever wanted Darian dead would not stop just because one attempt had failed, and waiting for them to strike again without preparation would be foolish. "I could help," she offered, the idea forming even as she spoke. "If people believe I am your healer, that I am the one keeping you alive after the poison, they might target me to finish what they started. That could give us the opening we need." Both brothers turned to stare at her like she had suggested something insane, which she supposed she had. "Absolutely not," Kale said flatly, his alpha command creeping into his voice. "You are not putting yourself in danger to draw out conspirators. I just got you here, just convinced you to give us a chance. I am not losing you because some power-hungry wolves decide you are an obstacle to their plans." His protectiveness would have been touching if it was not also frustrating, and Alara felt her own stubbornness rise to meet his. "You do not get to make that decision for me. I am not some fragile thing that needs to be locked away for safekeeping. I am a healer, yes, but I am also someone who survived months alone in hostile territory. I can take care of myself, and more importantly, I can help end the threat to Darian and to this pack." The argument that followed was heated, but ultimately productive, with Alara holding her ground against Kale's overprotective instincts, while Darian mediated and pointed out the tactical advantages of her plan. By the end of the night, they had agreed on a modified version, where Alara would be publicly announced as Darian's personal healer, responsible for his continued recovery. But she would have guards watching her at all times, and would never be truly alone. It was a compromise. That satisfied no one completely, which Alara had learned usually meant it was the right choice. Over the following weeks, the plan was set into motion with careful precision. Alara took up residence in the healer's wing, working alongside Marjorie and the others to learn the specific protocols of Thornwood's medical practices, while also spending obvious time with Darian, treating his injuries and helping him regain his full strength. The silver-haired prince played his part perfectly, acting weaker than he actually was, and making sure everyone knew how dependent he was on Alara's healing skills for his recovery. Meanwhile, Kale's investigators quietly worked to identify potential traitors within the pack, building a list of wolves who had the means and motive to orchestrate an attack on the heir. Through it all, Alara and Kale's relationship developed in fits and starts, moments of genuine connection interrupted by Kale's instinctive withdrawal whenever things felt too intimate. They took walks in the fortress gardens where Kale told her about his childhood before the tragedy, shared meals where Alara spoke about her mother's healing techniques and the pain of rejection, and slowly, carefully, began to build the trust that would be necessary for their bond to truly flourish. Alara learned that Kale had a sharp wit hidden beneath his stern exterior, that he loved classical music and could play the piano with surprising skill, that he carried the weight of every decision, like a physical burden he could never set down. Kale learned that Alara was stronger than she appeared, that her kindness was a choice rather than weakness, that she challenged him in ways no one else dared, and he found himself grateful for it. The trap was sprung on a night when the full moon rode high in the sky, and the pack's lunar celebration was in full swing. Alara had deliberately positioned herself alone in the healing wing, sorting through herbs while humming the tune her mother used to sing, acting completely oblivious to danger. Kale and Darian were hidden nearby with a contingent of their most trusted warriors, waiting for whoever would take the bait. The hours stretched with agonizing slowness, the sounds of celebration filtering through the windows, while Alara pretended to work and tried not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. Then, just past midnight, when most of the pack would be deep into their revelry, she heard it. Footsteps in the hallway outside, moving, with the careful quiet of someone who did not want to be detected. Alara's heart hammered in her chest, but she forced herself to stay calm, to continue her work as if she had noticed nothing unusual. The door to the healing wing opened silently, and she looked up to see 3 wolves enter, their faces covered with dark cloth masks, but their builds and movements marking them as trained fighters. "Can I help you?" Alara asked, proud of how steady her voice sounded despite the fear coursing through her. "The healing wing is closed for the night unless there is an emergency." The largest of the 3 stepped forward, and when he spoke, his voice was cold and devoid of mercy. "You are the emergency healer. You should not have saved the prince. Your interference has made you a problem that needs to be eliminated." Before Alara could respond, before the masked wolves could make their move, Kale and his warriors burst into the room from their hiding places. The fight was brutal but brief. Kale, moving with the deadly efficiency of a trained killer, to subdue the attackers before they could harm Alara or escape. Within minutes, all 3 were restrained and unmasked, revealing 2 wolves Alara did not recognize, and one that made her blood run cold. It was Marcus, the beta who had escorted Darian from her cave, one of Kale's own trusted guards. "Why?" Kale demanded, his voice shaking with rage and betrayal. "You have served this pack for years, Marcus. You stood at my father's funeral and swore loyalty to me. Why would you conspire to kill my brother?" Marcus laughed, the sound bitter and hateful. "Because your father was weak and you are no better. This pack should be feared across all territories, should be taking what we want rather than negotiating like cowards. Darian would have been even worse, always talking about reforms and making alliances. We needed him gone so the pack could be restructured properly, led by someone with the vision to make us truly powerful." His eyes burned with fanaticism as he spoke, completely convinced of the righteousness of his cause. "I served the old ways, the true ways of alpha dominance and strength. Everything your family represents is poison to what we should be." The confession was everything they needed. Proof of conspiracy and motive that would justify whatever punishment Kale chose to impose. But Alara could see the pain in her mate's expression, the fresh wound of another betrayal cutting deep, despite all his careful walls. Kale looked at Marcus with something like grief, before his face hardened into the merciless mask of the Alpha King. "You will be executed at dawn, along with your co-conspirators. Your families will be exiled from Thornwood territory, but spared execution themselves as they were not party to your treason. That is more mercy than you showed my brother or Ilara." He turned away, unable to look at the man any longer. "Take them to the cells and post a full guard. I want no possibility of escape or suicide before justice can be properly served." As the prisoners were dragged away, still shouting their twisted ideology, Cale's composure finally cracked. He sagged against the wall, exhaustion and emotional pain written clearly across his features, and Ilara went to him without hesitation. She wrapped her arms around him, offering silent comfort, and felt the moment he gave in and allowed himself to lean into her support. "How many more?" he whispered against her hair, his voice raw with anguish. "How many more people will betray everything I am trying to build? How many more times do I have to watch wolves I trusted reveal themselves as enemies?" "I do not know," Ilara admitted, holding him tighter. "But you do not have to face it alone anymore. You have Darian. You have loyal pack members who genuinely believe in what you are building. And you have me. Let us help carry this weight, Kyle. You do not have to be strong every single moment of every single day." She pulled back, just enough to meet his eyes, her hands framing his face with gentle insistence. What Marcus believed, that vision of dominance and fear, it is not strength. It is tyranny. You are building something better, something worth fighting for. And yes, that means sometimes people will disappoint you, but it also means you are creating a pack where wolves can thrive rather than just survive. Do not let one traitor's corruption make you doubt the value of that work. Kyle stared at her like she was something miraculous and impossible. His silver eyes wet with unshed tears he refused to let fall. "How are you real?" he asked, the question barely above a whisper. "How can you have so much faith in me when you have only known me a few weeks?" Ilara smiled, sad and understanding, and full of an emotion she was not quite ready to name. "Because I see you, Cale Thornwood, not the alpha king or the fearsome leader, or the man built from walls and scar tissue. I see the person who apologized when he was wrong, who defended me to his whole pack, who plays piano when he thinks no one is listening, and carries the weight of every decision like a sacred trust. That person deserves faith, deserves to be believed in. So I choose to believe, even when it is hard, even when you make it difficult." Something broke in Cale then, some final wall that had been holding him separate from the fullness of the mate bond, and he kissed her. It was not gentle or careful, but desperate and claiming. Months of denial and want and need poured into the press of lips and the slide of tongues. Ilara kissed him back with equal fervor, her hands tangling in his dark hair, the mate bond singing between them with such intensity it was almost painful. This was what had been missing. She realized through the haze of desire and emotion. This was the moment of true acceptance, of choosing each other not because the bond demanded it, but because they wanted it, because they had seen each other's flaws and scars and chosen to love anyway. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Cale rested his forehead against hers in the gesture that was becoming their own private intimacy. "I love you," he said simply, the words offered without hesitation or fear. "I do not know when it happened or how you managed to slip past every defense I built, but I love you, Ilara, and I am choosing you, choosing us, choosing to believe that maybe, just maybe, the universe knew what it was doing when it made us mates." Ilara felt tears slip down her cheeks, happy tears for the first time in longer than she could remember. "I love you too. Your walls and your wounds and your terrible, suspicious nature and all. You are mine, Cale Thornwood, and I am never letting you go." They stood there in the healing wing, surrounded by the scent of herbs and the lingering evidence of the night's confrontation, and made silent promises to each other. To trust even when it was hard, to communicate even when it hurt, to build something together that was stronger than either of them could create alone. It was a beginning, a real one this time, and as Cale took her hand and led her toward his private chambers, Ilara felt hope settle into her bones, hope that she had finally found her place, her purpose, her home. The execution the next morning was carried out with grim efficiency, Marcus and his co-conspirators meeting their end before the assembled pack as required by tradition. Ilara stood beside Kale on the platform, her hand clasped in his, presenting a united front to anyone who might still question her place as his mate and future Luna. There was sorrow in watching lives end, even the lives of traitors, but there was also a sense of justice being served, and a warning delivered to anyone else who might consider similar treachery. Kale's rule was not without mercy, but it was also not weak, and those who betrayed the pack would face the full consequences of their choices. In the weeks that followed, life in Thornwood settled into new patterns. Ilara officially took her place as Luna in training, working alongside Kale to understand the administrative and political aspects of pack leadership while continuing her healing work. She implemented changes to how Omegas were treated within the pack structure, advocating for recognition of their unique skills, rather than automatic relegation to the lowest rungs of hierarchy. Some resisted these changes, clinging to old prejudices, but Kyle supported her fully, and most of the pack began to see the value in her reforms. Omegas who had hidden their talents for fear of being dismissed stepped forward to contribute in ways that strengthened the entire community, proving that worth had nothing to do with designation and everything to do with character. Darian recovered fully from his injuries, the aconite poison finally flushed from his system, and returned to his duties as second prince with renewed energy. He and Ilara had formed a genuine friendship during his recovery, built on shared experiences and mutual respect, and he often joked that she had saved his life in more ways than one, by finally getting through to his brother's heart. The three of them worked together to unravel the rest of the conspiracy, discovering that Marcus had been part of a larger network of traditionalists who rejected Kale's more progressive leadership style. Most surrendered when confronted with the evidence against them, accepting exile rather than execution, but a few had to be dealt with more permanently. 6 months after Ilara first found an injured silver wolf in the forest, she stood in the great hall once more, this time dressed in formal ceremonial robes for her official Luna ceremony. The entire pack had gathered to witness her formal acceptance into the Thornwood leadership, the ritual that would bind her not just to Kale, but to every wolf under his protection. Marjorie performed the ceremony, her voice strong and sure as she spoke the ancient words that had marked Luna transitions for generations. Ilara repeated the vows, promising to protect and serve, to heal and lead, to stand beside her Alpha King as his equal partner in all things. When Kale placed the Luna's circlet on her head, silver worked with moonstone that caught the light and shimmered. The pack howled their approval in a sound that raised goosebumps along Ilara's arms. That night, in the privacy of their shared chambers, Kale made love to her with a tenderness that still surprised her even after months together. He had proven over and over that beneath the harsh exterior beat the heart of a man capable of deep feeling and genuine care. But sometimes she still could not quite believe this was her life. "What are you thinking?" Kyle murmured against her skin, his hands mapping familiar territory with possessive affection. "You have that far-away look that usually means your mind is somewhere else." Ilara smiled, running her fingers through his dark hair and marveling at how comfortable they had become with each other's bodies and hearts. "I was thinking about how strange life is. 6 months ago, I was alone in a cave, convinced I would never be part of a pack again, never find my place in the world. Now I am Luna of Thornwood, bonded to the most complicated man I have ever met, and somehow impossibly happy." "Impossibly happy," Kale repeated, rolling the words around like he was testing their truth. "I like that. It feels accurate." He propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at her with an expression so full of love it made her chest ache. "You changed everything, Ilara. You took my frozen heart and my broken trust and somehow made me believe in good things again. I do not know what I did to deserve you, but I am grateful every single day that you chose to save my brother and ended up saving me too." His hand came up to cup her cheek, thumb stroking over her cheekbone with infinite gentleness. "Thank you for not giving up on me, even when I gave you every reason to walk away. Thank you for letting me in," Ilara replied, turning her head to press a kiss to his palm. for trusting me with your wounds and your fears and your heart. I know how hard that was for you, how much it cost." They lay together in comfortable silence, the mate bond humming with contentment. And Alara thought about all the small choices that had led to this moment. The choice to help an injured wolf, to stand up to an alpha. King's suspicions, to believe in the possibility of love, even when everything else in her life had taught her to expect rejection. Each choice had been terrifying in its own way, but each had also been necessary to get here, to this place of belonging and purpose and joy. If you have made it this far, thank you so much for watching. Please hit that like button if you enjoyed Alara and Kale's journey from suspicion to love, and let me know in the comments what you think their future holds. Will they be able to maintain the reforms Alara started, or will traditional forces push back? What challenges will they face as they build their life together? Subscribe to see more supernatural romance stories like this one, because I have so many more tales of fated mates and pack politics and love that transforms everything it touches. Epilogue. 5 years later, the Thornwood pack had transformed in ways that would have seemed impossible when Kale first took the throne. The rigid hierarchy that had once defined pack life had softened into something more flexible, where wolves were valued for their contributions rather than their designations. Omegas served in positions of leadership, their unique skills recognized and celebrated. The healing wing had expanded under Alara's guidance, becoming a center of medical excellence that attracted wolves from neighboring territories seeking treatment. And the pack's reputation had shifted from fear to respect, other alphas coming to Kale for advice on conflict resolution and fair governance, rather than expecting threats and ultimatums. Alara stood in the garden she had created behind the fortress, watching her 2-year-old daughter toddle after butterflies, with the single-minded determination only toddlers possessed. Lyra had her father's silver eyes and her mother's healing gifts, already showing an unusual sensitivity to others' pain despite her young age. Darian sat on a nearby bench with his own mate, a fierce warrior woman named Cassandra, who had challenged him to a duel the first day they met and ended up challenging his heart instead. They were expecting their first child, and the joy in Darian's golden eyes every time he looked at his mate made Alara's heart full. Kale emerged from the fortress, loosening the formal collar he had worn for the day's council meetings, and his entire expression softened when he saw his family. He crossed to Alara and pulled her into his arms, pressing a kiss to her temple with the casual affection that had become second nature over the years. "How was your day?" he asked, watching Lyra with the fierce protectiveness that never quite left his gaze when his daughter was in view. "Eventful," Alara replied with a laugh. Lyra healed a bird that flew into the window, then cried for an hour when we had to let it go because she wanted to keep it as a pet. She has your stubborn streak and my soft heart, which is going to be a dangerous combination when she gets older. She is perfect, Kale declared, with the absolute certainty of a father who thought his daughter could do no wrong. Just like her mother. He pulled Alara closer, resting his chin on top of her head in a gesture of contentment. "The council approved your proposal to establish a healer's school. We will start construction in the spring, opening it to wolves from all packs who want to learn proper medical techniques. Your legacy is going to extend far beyond just Thornwood." Alara felt pride swell in her chest, gratitude for this life she had built, and the mate who supported her every vision. "Our legacy," she corrected gently. "None of this would be possible without you, without the foundation you built, and the trust you gave me to make changes." They stood together as the sun set over their territory, watching Lyra play and Darian laugh with Cassandra. Surrounded by the pack they had shaped into something beautiful and strong, Alara thought about that day in the forest, about the choice to help an injured wolf that had seemed so simple at the time, but had changed absolutely everything. She thought about the Alpha King who had tried so hard to reject what they could be together, and the way love had transformed them both. She thought about healing and trust, and the power of choosing compassion, even when fear demanded otherwise. "I would do it all again," Alara said softly, turning to look up at her mate with eyes full of love and certainty. "Every difficult moment, every challenge, every time I was scared or uncertain, I would choose it all again to get here, to this life with you." Kale's silver eyes blazed with emotion as he looked down at her, his hands framing her face with the reverence reserved for precious things. "So would I," he replied, and kissed her as the sun painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, as their daughter laughed and their family grew, as the pack they had built together thrived around them. The Alpha King had found her sharing food with an injured wolf, not knowing it was his brother, and in saving one life, she had changed countless others, including, most importantly, her own. I hope you enjoyed this complete supernatural romance. Please like this video if you want to see more stories about fated mates, pack politics, and love that overcomes even the deepest wounds. Comment below telling me what your favorite moment was, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another tale of werewolves, redemption, and the healing power of true love. Thank you so much for watching until the very end.